Welcome to the Roy Morgan Quarterly Update webinar covering the first quarter of 2023. Shortly, I'll run through the new rankings in trust and distrust of brands in Australia. But first, we have breaking news. I can reveal that in the first quarter of 2023, Australia's national carrier Qantas has plunged a further 144 rankings from Australia's 9th most trusted brand last year to now being one of the country's top 20 most distrusted brands. But more about Qantas a little later. Trust is critical in our daily lives because it facilitates cooperation, it enables smooth economic transactions, it promotes social cohesion, and it acts as the backbone of social institutions, from legal and financial to political and educational institutions. When customers trust a brand, they continue buying its products or services, they recommend it to others, and they remain loyal. So trust is the underpinning foundation of brand reputation. And while this seems a simple enough aphorism, it's much more than just a useful slogan. As the foundation of brand reputation, trust has an actual material impact on a brand. It goes way beyond comms and onto the balance sheet. American outdoor clothing company Patagonia credits high levels of trust for its ability to charge higher prices. Or take global consumer goods brand Unilever. More than 3/4 of Unilever's market cap is created by trust and brand reputation. That's 100 billion euros. But it's distrust where our deepest fears, pain, and betrayal surface. Roy Morgan data on distrust and our own lived experience since 2018 reveals that distrust can have a toxic and destructive impact on a brand's reputation and a material impact on its financial strength. Take Medibank, for instance, which lost $1.6 billion off its market value immediately after its devastating data breach. So how do we measure trust and distrust? Well, we're Roy Morgan, so we conduct a survey, a continuous survey. We've just entered our 6th year of asking about 2,000 Australians, different Australians each and every month, which brands they trust and which brands they distrust. We also ask them why they trust or distrust their nominated brand, and we record exactly what they say in their own words and use AI to code that up into themes. The research is open-ended, it's unprompted. And that means for people who nominate a brand, it's so top of mind that they put it ahead of all other brands swirling around in their consciousness. Let's now turn to the trusted and distrusted industry rankings. Supermarkets and general retail are still the most trusted industries in Australia, but in the wake of the Optus data breach, the telecommunications industry deteriorated in the March quarter to replace social media as Australia's most distrusted industry. That's a first. And interestingly, the travel and tourism industry plummeted by 7 places, dragged down by Qantas's dramatic decline. Both these industries show how the soaring distrust of just one brand can impact an entire industry. So now let's take a look at specific brands. First, we look at the good news brands, those with a net trust score, meaning they're more trusted than distrusted. Woolworths again takes the top spot as the most trusted brand in Australia. It seems Coles just can't make any headway on closing the gap between second position and the top spot. And Kmart overtakes Aldi to become the 4th most trusted brand. In a remarkable turnaround, the Commonwealth Bank soars 23 places to enter the top 20 most trusted brands for the first time. And although not in the top 20, the other big mover is also a bank. That's NAB. NAB jumped 61 places. The other improvers are Samsung, continuing its climb up the rankings, Kmart, Apple, Bendigo Bank and ING. Interestingly, ING and Bendigo Bank were for years neck and neck, but over the past few quarters, Bendigo has widened that gap. Now it's back to negative territory. Australia's most distrusted brands. Those brands that are more distrusted than trusted. There were no changes to the top 6 most distrusted brands since last quarter, with Optus continuing to displace Telstra from the 2nd spot. Facebook has always held top spot as the most distrusted brand in Australia, and we don't expect that to change anytime soon. Just a week ago, the European Union hit Meta, that's Facebook's parent company, with a $2 billion fine for harvesting the personal data of millions of Europeans and transferring it back to the US. And Facebook, of course, has form when it comes to personal data breaches. And we expect this latest breach to push the distrust even further into the red. Looking at brands now that became more distrusted in the last quarter, they're the brands shaded red in that chart with a red arrow. Qantas is the biggest loser, joining its smaller sibling Jetstar in the top 20. This is the first time since late 2017, when we started ranking trusted and distrusted brands, that both Qantas and Jetstar have been on the Australian 20 most distrusted brand list. Medibank's dramatic decline continues. More than 5 months after its customer data breach, Medibank's distrust ranking has jumped 7 more places, making it the 7th most distrusted brand in Australia. TikTok also moved 2 places to become the 13th most distrusted brand. Distrust improvers are led by Google, which improved by 5 places to be the 12th most distrusted brand. And continuing the recovery of the banks, not one of the big 4 is now on the top 20 distrusted list. Westpac moved out of the top 20, improving 21 places, and ANZ improved by 27 places. AGL and Crown also improved in the March quarter. But now let's return to Qantas and take a closer look at its unprecedented decline. In just 6 months, Qantas has gone from being the 9th most trusted brand in Australia to being the country's 19th most distrusted brand. That means that over the 6 months to March, Qantas fell 175 places on the rankings. To put that into context, since their respective customer data hacks in late 2022, Optus has fallen 17 places and Medibank 79 places. Qantas fell 175 places. This kind of consumer reaction is extremely rare, particularly without there being a single catastrophic event like a data breach or a devastating Royal Commission finding. This graph reveals the dramatic downfall of Qantas's reputation under CEO Alan Joyce. Trust is green and distrust is red, and the black line is net trust or net distrust. They're calculated by subtracting a brand's distrust score from its trust score. Between early 2019 and early 2022, Qantas enjoyed fairly consistent levels of trust. But in June last year, the airline's trust started to decline, and by October, that had converted into soaring distrust. By February this year, Qantas had registered a net distrust score for the first time, and the downward spiral is continuing. So what's behind this dramatic fall from grace for one of Australia's perennial darlings? From the middle of last year, Qantas was hit with a torrent of public criticism over cancelled flights, lost luggage, what people have described as appalling call centre delays and snail's pace fare refunds, and a leadership seemingly out of touch with the horrors being faced every day by thousands of once loyal passengers. And they largely blame outgoing CEO Alan Joyce. It's important for me to say at this point that this is not my opinion or the opinion of Roy Morgan. This is what Australians are telling us. So answering the question, why do you distrust Qantas? One respondent spoke for many, saying they exploit customers in difficult situations. They care only about making money for shareholders, not about their customers. Another respondent said the completely incompetent CEO thinks the solution to every crisis is to make people redundant and replace employees with subcontractors. And many respondents nominate CEO Alan Joyce as the reason they distrust Qantas. This slide graphically shows Alan Joyce's role in the reputational damage to Qantas. As another respondent said, they're constantly cancelling flights at the last minute and leaving customers stranded, but according to Alan Joyce, it's always someone else's problem. The million-dollar question is, will incoming CEO Vanessa Hudson invest the necessary time to understand and get under the bonnet of why Australians have so comprehensively turned against Qantas? I think she will. Mr. Joyce has just announced that in this financial year, his last year at the Qantas helm, he'll deliver close to a $2.5 billion profit, the biggest, he says, in the company's long history. So I hear you asking, if Qantas is so dramatically distrusted, but it's making record profits, does distrust really matter? It's a good question, and the answer is a resounding yes, it really does matter. This level of distrust potentially makes Qantas a fragile brand, with customers increasingly likely to look for alternative airlines, particularly as Virgin Australia starts to look more and more like an alternative. Moving from Qantas to the winners, we see that all 4 of the big banks improved their trust rankings in this report, with CBA the biggest winner. The Commonwealth Bank jumped a remarkable 23 places. And that means the big 4 banks continue their incursion into net trust territory, pulling the whole banking industry up with them. With the CBA the most trusted of the big 4 and NAB a close second, on the current trajectory, it's only a matter of time until ANZ and then Westpac join them in net trust territory. This is a massive turnaround for the banks, with CBA and NAB the real stars. And that brings us to a close on this quarterly update. Be sure to look out for our other webinars, the telecommunications and energy webinars, and be sure to look out for the webinar on Australia's top premium brands. In the meantime, why don't you subscribe to our YouTube channel for a whole range of Roy Morgan data and insights, and check out our online store for trust reports. Thank you for joining me. I hope to see you next time.